Imagine a school bus driving through a beautiful, lush valley. Inside, there are girls laughing and talking about exams. Suddenly, the bus stops. Two men step on. One of them shouts, "Who is Malala?" No one says a word, but their eyes move toward a 15-year-old girl. In that split second, the man pulls out a Colt 45 and fires 3 shots. One bullet hits her in the left eye socket and travels down her neck. That moment was supposed to be the end of a young girl's life. Instead, it became the beginning of a global revolution. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today, we are exploring one of the most powerful memoirs of the 21st century, I Am Malala by Malala Yousafzai. Now, you've probably seen her on the news or watched her accept the Nobel Peace Prize, but today, we're going behind the headlines. We're going to look at the girl behind the icon. By the end of this episode, we're going to understand how a teenager's blog became a threat to a terrorist empire, the incredible role her father played in her defiance, and what Malala's journey teaches us about the soft power of a pen in a world of swords. Whether you're a student, a parent, or just someone looking for a reason to believe in the courage of the human spirit, this story is for you. Let's set the stage. To understand Malala, you have to understand the Swat Valley in Pakistan. She describes it as the most beautiful place on earth, the Switzerland of the East. It's a place of emerald green mountains, crystal clear rivers, and ancient history. But Malala's story doesn't start with a tragedy. It starts with a birth. In many parts of the world, when a girl is born, it's a quiet affair. In her culture, at that time, when a boy was born, there was a celebration. Rifles were fired in the air and gifts were exchanged. When a girl was born, the neighbors would pity the parents. But Malala's father, Ziauddin, was different. He looked into her eyes and told people, "I know there is something different about this child." He even broke tradition by adding her name to the family tree, a tree that for 300 years had only listed men. This is a crucial point to remember. Malala didn't become a hero in a vacuum. She was raised by a man who believed that a daughter's education was just as valuable as a son's. Ziauddin was a teacher who started his own school with nothing but a few chairs and a lot of grit. Malala grew up in those classrooms. For her, school wasn't a chore, it was a sanctuary. It was where she felt powerful. But then, the world changed. The Taliban arrived. It didn't happen overnight. It was like a slow-moving fog. It started with a radio station. A man named Fazlullah began broadcasting, initially sounding like a pious leader. He told people to stop smoking, to pray more, to give up old un-Islamic habits. People liked it, but then the tone shifted. He started naming people who didn't follow his rules. He started saying that girls shouldn't go to school. He called education Western and shameful. Think about the psychological pressure of that. Imagine living in a small town where everyone listens to the same radio station and that station starts calling you out for wanting to learn. Slowly, the beauty of Swat began to rot. Music was banned, dancing was banned, and then the schools started blowing up. By 2008, the Taliban had destroyed over 400 schools. They didn't just want to stop girls from learning, they wanted to erase the very idea of a future for them. Now, imagine you're 11 years old. You see your school being threatened. You see your friends dropping out because their parents are terrified. What do? Most of us would hide, but Malala, encouraged by her father, did something radical. She started writing. She began a secret blog for the BBC under a pseudonym, Gul Makai. She wrote about the fear of walking to school in plain clothes so the Taliban wouldn't know she was a student. She wrote about hiding her books under her shawl. She wrote about her dreams. Before we move into the escalation of the conflict and the day that changed everything, let's take a quick breath. If you're finding this story as moving as I am, please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast. Your support helps us bring these vital stories of courage and history to more people. Give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It's a small click for you, but it's a huge help for us to stay independent and keep the conversation going. back to the valley. The blog became a sensation. People across the world were reading the thoughts of this anonymous girl in Pakistan. But as her voice grew louder, her anonymity began to slip. She started appearing on television with her father. She was no longer just a blogger, she was an activist. She once said in an interview, "They can stop us from going to school, but they cannot stop us from learning." Think about the sheer defiance in that. At 12 years old, she was challenging men with guns using nothing but her vocabulary. But the Taliban doesn't like to be challenged. They issued a formal threat against her. Most people thought, surely they won't hurt a child. In the Pashtun Code of Conduct, women are protected. Even in war, you don't target a girl. But the Taliban had moved beyond any code. To them, Malala wasn't a child. She was a symbol of Western filth because she believed that a girl's mind belonged to herself, not to a regime.
The threats were no longer whispers. They were printed in newspapers. They were whispered in the markets. Malala's father, Ziauddin, was the primary target for a long time. But Malala told him, "If they come for me, I will take my shoe and hit them." But then she corrected herself. She realized that if she hit a Talib with a shoe, there would be no difference between her and the Talib. She decided that if they came, she would tell them how important education is, even for their own daughters. That brings us to October 9th, 2012. It was a Tuesday. It was exam season. Malala had spent the morning worrying about her grades, just like any other teenager. The school bus, which was really just a truck with benches, was crowded and noisy. Then the bus was stopped in a narrow alley. When the gunman fired, the bus went from a scene of childhood chatter to a scene of horror. Malala fell into the lap of her best friend, Muniba. Her hair was soaked in blood. Two other girls, Shazia and Kainat, were also hit. The gunman fled, thinking he had finished his job. He thought he had silenced a girl. In reality, he had just given her a megaphone that would reach every corner of the planet. The next few days were a blur of chaos and miracles. Malala was flown to a military hospital in Peshawar, then to Rawalpindi. Her brain was swelling. A portion of her skull had to be removed to give her brain room to breathe. The doctors worked tirelessly, but the Taliban were still making threats, even saying they would finish the job in the hospital. The decision was made to fly her to Birmingham, England. Imagine the scene. Malala is in a medically induced coma, flying across continents, while her parents are stuck in Pakistan, waiting for their own paperwork. When she finally woke up in the UK, her first thought wasn't, "Am I safe?" or "Where are my parents?" It was, "Thank God I'm not dead." But her second thought was, "Who is going to pay for this?" Even in her darkest hour, she was worried about the burden she might be on her family. The recovery was grueling. She had to learn how to walk again. She had to learn how to talk again. The bullet had severed a nerve in her face, leaving the left side paralyzed. She underwent multiple surgeries to repair her hearing and to reconstruct her skull with a titanium plate. Through it all, the world was watching. Millions of people were sending cards, flowers, and prayers. The girl the Taliban tried to kill had become the daughter of the whole world. But here is the truly incredible part. Many people, after surviving such a trauma, would have chosen a quiet life. They would have taken the asylum, stayed in the UK, and tried to forget the nightmare. Not Malala. On her 16th birthday, just 9 months after she was shot, she stood before the United Nations. She wasn't wearing a hospital gown anymore. She was wearing the shawl of Benazir Bhutto, the assassinated Prime Minister of Pakistan. She stood there, her voice steady, and she said, "The terrorists thought that they would change our aims and stop our ambitions, but nothing changed in my life except this. Weakness, fear, and hopelessness died. Strength, power, and courage was born." That speech changed everything. It was the moment Malala moved from being a victim to being a leader. She reminded us that one child, one teacher, one book,
and one pen can change the world. Before we dive into the complexities of her life in the West and the legacy she continues to build, let's take another quick break. If this story is inspiring you to rethink the value of your own education or the power of your own voice, please share this episode. Tag us on social media and let us know what Malala's courage means to you. And if you haven't already, head over to our website to sign up for our newsletter, where we go even deeper into the books we discuss every week. Now, let's talk about the aftermath that people don't often discuss. Moving to the UK was a massive culture shock for Malala. In Swat, she was a leader. In Birmingham, she was a student who struggled to make friends at first because everyone saw her as a famous person rather than just Malala. She talks about the irony of winning the Nobel Peace Prize but still fighting with her brothers over the TV remote. It's a beautiful reminder of her humanity. She's not a saint, she's a person who made a choice. She missed the mountains of Swat, she missed her friends, she felt the weight of being a symbol. People started to project their own ideas onto her. To the West, she was a hero of Western values. To some in Pakistan, unfortunately, she was seen as a tool of the West. She had to navigate this incredibly narrow path, staying true to her Muslim faith, her Pashtun identity, and her global mission for girls' education. She didn't want to be the girl who was shot by the Taliban. She wanted to be the girl who fought for education. There's a massive difference between those two identities. One is defined by what happened to her.
As Malala grew older, she faced a new challenge: how to balance being a global icon with being a normal young woman. In 2017, she was accepted into the University of Oxford. Think about the poetic justice of that. The group that tried to stop her from finishing middle school ended up watching her enter one of the most prestigious universities in the world. She studied philosophy, politics, and economics, the famous PPE degree that has shaped world leaders for decades. At Oxford, she did what the Taliban feared most. She thought for herself. She joined the cricket club, she hung out with friends late at night talking about life, and she struggled with the same mountain of essays that every other student faces. When she graduated in 2020, it wasn't just a personal win. It was a victory for every girl who has ever been told that her place is in the kitchen and not the classroom. But even as she lived a life of safety in the UK, Malala never turned her back on her home. When the Taliban regained power in Afghanistan in 2021, she was one of the first and loudest voices calling on the international community to protect the rights of Afghan women. She knew better than anyone what was at stake. She knew that when girls are barred from school, a darkness falls over a nation that can take generations to lift. Today, Malala is no longer the child we saw in the news. She is a married woman, a producer, an author, and a relentless advocate. She has shown us that bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's the belief that something else is more important than fear. For her, that something else was the right to learn. The story of Malala Yousafzai is often framed as a miracle, and in many ways it is. The medical recovery alone was a 1 in a million outcome. But the real miracle isn't that she survived, it's what she chose to do with her survival. She could have been bitter, she could have been silent. Instead, she chose to forgive, and she chose to speak. She often says that she doesn't want to be remembered as the girl who was shot, but as the girl who fought. And as we look at the world in 2026, her message is more urgent than ever. We see education being stripped away in some parts of the world, and we see it being taken for granted in others. Malala reminds us that a book is a weapon, the most peaceful, powerful weapon we have. To wrap things up, let's look at the I Am Malala cheat sheet, the 3 big takeaways from her journey. First, your voice has no age limit. Malala started her blog at 11. You are never too young or too ordinary to stand up against injustice. If you see something wrong, speak it, write it, or share it. Second, education is the ultimate equalizer. It's the reason extremists are so afraid of books.
Knowledge gives people the power to question, and to those who rule through fear, a questioning mind is the most dangerous thing on earth. And third, the power of a supportive foundation. Malala's story is also the story of her father, Ziauddin. It's a reminder that when we support the women and girls in our lives, we aren't just helping them, we are strengthening our entire society. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive into I Am Malala. It's a story that reminds us that even in the face of the greatest darkness, a single candle can light the way for millions. If this episode moved you, please share it with someone, maybe a student who's struggling with their studies or a friend who needs a reminder of what courage looks like. Don't forget to check out our show notes for links to the Malala Fund and more resources on how you can support global education. Until next time, cherish your books, value your teachers, and remember, your voice can change the world, but only if you choose to use it.